From this, you pick and choose 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, how many you want, you just choose at random from the population. So that becomes a representative sample. If the population is very small, fine, you need not have a sample. You can just collect information from the entire population. You are dividing the population. The population is there, so you divide them into various subgroups, and then you see that you randomly select the entire subgroup is selected. Hello everyone, I am Purnima, faculty in the Department of Commerce and Management, Vidyashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. I welcome you all to the session. In this session on Unit 4, Session 1, let's have a look at the sampling and the techniques of sampling. In this, let us understand what is the meaning of the word sampling. Sampling is a process in statistical analysis where researchers take a predetermined number of observations from a larger population. The method of sampling depends on the type of analysis being performed, but it may include simple random sampling or systematic sampling. So we all know that. So if this is the population, so this is the population, means the number of persons you have to just collect the information from. So the entire set of people from whom you have to collect the information, that we call it as the population. And then from this, you pick and choose 1 or 2 of them. See, you have chosen only 3 here. So this 3 persons, they are considered as the sample. So in order to select these 3, we have a process, that is the sampling process. Now, what is this sampling process? The 3 steps in the sampling process, and how do we go about by the help of the sampling process? All this we will be studying in this Unit 4. And then finally, how do you select these 3 persons from the sample, from the population? So that entire thing we will be covering in this chapter. Now, the method of sampling depends on the type of analysis being performed. So, what is the kind of study you are performing? And based on that, it includes simple random sampling or the systematic sampling. So, random means random, at random you do. So, there is nothing like you don't have a specific route. You just pick the samples at random, just like a lottery, you have to just pick up the numbers. The same way at random you pick the samples, or it is a systematic sample. So, in systematic manner you decide the sample. So, in this way the sampling is a process in statistical analysis where researchers take a predetermined number of observations from a larger population. So, from a large population, you have taken only 3 of them. So, this process of taking the 3 of them, that we call it as the sampling process. Now, next, if the chosen sample should be a fair representation of the entire population. When taking a sample from a larger population, it is important to consider how the sample is chosen. Now, from the population, if you are choosing a sample, then it should represent the population. So, the sample whoever is choosing, he is a representative of the entire population. So, he should possess all the characteristics of the population. Only then he can be considered as a perfect sample. Otherwise, you cannot consider him as a sample. So, when you are taking a sample, it is important to consider how the sample is chosen. Now, how do you choose the sample? That becomes important. To get a representative sample, it must be drawn randomly and encompass the whole population. So, in order to have a perfect sample, you should choose anyone from this population at random. Random means you don't have fixed rules. So, at random you select one person from the population, then and encompass the whole population. The whole population is there. From this, you pick and choose 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, how many you want, you just choose at random from the population. So, that becomes a representative sample. For example, a lottery system could be used to determine the average age of students in a university by sampling 10% of the student body. So, if you have to just say that you have to have a information from the university students, then almost there may be lakhs together. Out of 10 lakhs of students in the university, you may just select 10% of them. That is just 1 lakh of the students you may interview. So, in this way, you can just determine how you are picking the sample for your object of research. Then, the next one is sampling methods, types, techniques and examples. We can see here this entire circle, it is full of population, but here this one, so this comprises the sample. So you have selected only 3 of them. So they comprise the sample. So when you conduct a research about a group of people, it is rarely possible to collect data from every person in that group. Instead, you select a sample. The sample is the group of individuals who will actually participate in the research. So when you are selecting a sample, the sample is the group of individuals who will actually participate in the research. Now, out of this entire population, I have selected 3 persons. So these 3 persons will be a part of the research process. So from them, I collect all the information, and from based on their information, whatever they have given, I will do my area of study. So they are the ones who will actually participate in the investigation. So these are the samples who will be participating in the investigation. Then, to draw valid conclusions from your results, you have to carefully decide how you will select a sample that is representative of the group as a whole. So it is called as the sampling method. So there are 2 primary types of sampling methods that you can use in your research. So when you have to have a sample, so in order to have valid conclusions, then it will be better for you to take a sample that is representative of the entire population. Now, this method is called as the sampling method, and there are 2 types of sampling methods. The first one is the probability sampling. It involves random selection, allowing you to make strong statistical inferences about the whole group. So, in the probability sampling, you have a random selection. Random selection means you pick and choose anyone at random. So, there is no perfect rule for that, for selection. So, allowing you to make strong statistical inferences about the whole group. Next one is non-probability sampling. It involves non-random selection based on convenience or other criteria, allowing you to easily collect the data. Now, there are 2 methods of sampling. In this, the first one is the probability method. Then the second one is the non-probability method. So, in probability method, you do it at random, whereas in non-probability method, it is based on convenience or any other criteria. Now, sampling methods, types, techniques, you should clearly explain how you select your sample in the methodology section of your paper or thesis, as well as how you approach minimizing research bias in your work. So, whenever you are doing research, you should mention what is the technique you have used, what technique of sampling you have used. Then, first you need to understand the difference between population and a sample and identify the target population of your research. Now, we have a comparison between the population and the sample. So, here the population is the entire group that you want to draw conclusions about. So, this becomes the population. So, this is the entire group from whom you have to collect the information and from whom you have to draw the conclusions. Then the sample is a specific group of individuals that you will collect the data from. So this is the sample. So from these you have selected 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So from this you have just collected 5 people as the sample. So it is the specific group of individuals from whom you will be collecting the information. The population can be defined in terms of a geographical location, age, income, or many other characteristics. So you can define the populations. How do you define who is the population? So it may be the persons residing in a geographical area, or it may be persons belonging to a certain age, or it may be persons having a certain income, or in this way any other criteria. Based on any other criteria, you divide the population, so that becomes the entire population. Then it can be very broad or quite narrow. Maybe you want to make inferences about the whole adult population of your country. Maybe your research focuses on customers of a certain company, patients with a specific health condition, or students in a single school. So if you have to have a comparison, then you have to decide who your population will be. So how do you decide your population? So it will be based on the, if you want to make inferences about the adult population of the country, then you have to divide the population on the basis of age. So if your research focuses on the customers of a certain company, then you have to see that your population will be all those persons who make use of that particular product. Then if you are having a research on patients with a specific health condition, then such patients will be your target of population. And then students of a single school, or if you are having inferences from the students, then students of a single school will be your target population. So it is important to carefully define your target population according to the purpose and practicalities of your research. So what is the purpose of your research and what is the practical aspect of your research? So based on that, you decide who is the population. If the population is very large, demographically mixed, and geographically dispersed, it might be difficult to gain access to representative sample. But if the population is very large, if the population is huge, then demographically mixed. Demographically mixed means they are spread out all over the nation or all over the world. Then geographically dispersed, that is, they are spread out all over the world, it might be difficult to gain access to representative sample. So in such cases, we cannot have a representative sample. A lack of representative sample affects the validity of your results and can lead to several research bias, particularly the sampling bias. So if you don't have a representative sample, then that may lead to a research biases, and particularly you will have this sampling bias. But whenever you are facing this problem, you have to try to see you should try to see that you get a representative sample for your area of research. Then the next one is the sampling frame. It is the actual list of individuals that the sample will be drawn from. Ideally, it should include the entire target population and nobody who is not a part of that population. So, the sampling frame is the actual list of individuals that sample will be drawn from. So, the sampling frame means it is the list of individuals from whom you will be collecting the information. It should include the entire target population. So, whoever is the target population, from that you are making a list of this kind of a sampling frame. So, sampling frame, you are doing research on working conditions at a social media marketing company. Your population is all 1,000 employees of the company. Your sampling frame is the company's HR database, which lists the name and contact details of every employee. Suppose you are having a research based on the employees of a marketing company. So, the population is all 1,000 employees of the company, and your sampling frame in the company's HR database, which lists the names and contact details of employees. So, you are doing a research on the employees of a particular company, then the entire list of the employees which is maintained with the HR, they become the entire population of the particular research. So, the number of individuals you should include in your sample depends on various factors, including the size and variability of the population and your research design. So, the number of, see, if you can see here, So you have selected this group of people, the three of them. So they are the sample, whereas these belong to the population. The number of individuals you should include in your sample depends on various factors, including the size and variability of the population and your research design. So it depends on various factors like including the size and variability of the population. So what is the population? If the population is very small, fine, you need not have a sample. You can just collect information from the entire population. But if it is very large only, then only you need to have a sample. Then variability of the population. If the population is variable, that is if they are geographically dispersed all over the world, then you should decide how to have your sample and your research design. So there are different sample size calculators and formulas depending on what you want to achieve with statistical analysis. Now, next we have the probability sampling. Probability sampling means that every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. It is mainly used in quantitative research. If you want to produce results that are representative of the whole population, probability sampling techniques are the most valid choice. So, when you are having this probability sampling, it means that every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. So, just like when you are drawing a lottery from a drum of full of numbers, so every number has an equal chance of being selected. The same way in probability sampling, every member of the population has a chance of being selected, and this kind of a sampling technique is mainly used in quantitative research. So, when you want to have quantitative research, we can use it. So, if you want to produce results that are representative of the whole population, the probability sampling will become the most valid choice. Next, there are four main types of probability sampling. In this, the first one is the simple random sampling. In the simple random sampling, you just select one person at random. So there is no fixed rules here. So here you have selected 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So at random you are selecting anybody, that becomes the simple random sample. Then in the systematic sample, if you see here, so you are selecting the every fourth 1, 2, 3, fourth person. So again 1, 2, 3, fourth person. Again 1, 2, 3, fourth person. So every fourth person you are selecting. So this becomes the systematic sampling. Then the stratified sampling. So you just divide the population into various groups, and from each group you are selecting one or two of them. So this becomes the stratified sampling. And then the cluster sampling. So cluster sampling means you select 3 from each of the group. So you have the sample, that is cluster. In a cluster you just select them. So instead of selecting each one, so you just select a group of people. So that becomes a cluster sample. Now let us see what is the meaning of simple random sampling. In simple random sampling, every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Your sampling frame should include the whole population. So the sampling frame should include the whole population. So conduct this type of sampling, you can use tools like random number generators or other techniques that are based entirely on chance. So, in case of the simple random sampling, you can have any of the samples at random, you are selecting them. So, in case you are numbering each one of the members of the population, so at random you can choose the numbers. So, in this way you can have any one of the samples. So, simple random sampling, you want to select a simple random sampling of 1000 employees of a social media marketing company. You assign a number to every employee in the company database from 1 to 1000. Use a random number generated to select the 100 members. Suppose there are 1000 employees in an organization and you have to do research on this. Then you assign a number to each of them. So, when you just pick the numbers, so they become the part of the sample. So, if you are selecting from 1 to 1000, if you have assigned the numbers for employees, then you will be writing, if the number 999 comes, then that person becomes a part of the sample. Then 659, then 785, then 450, then 120. So any number which comes up, so that you pick up 100 numbers from that, so they form the sample. Next one is the systematic sampling. So systematic sampling is similar to simple random sampling, but it is usually slightly easier to conduct. Every member of the population is listed with a number, but instead of randomly generating numbers, individuals are chosen at regular intervals. So in the systematic sampling, so we have individuals who are there in the population. So each of them I have assigned a number. So when I assign a number for each of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 10. So I select every third member. So this one, 1 and 3 and then 6 and then 9. So in this way, I follow a pattern of selecting the persons. So that becomes systematic sampling. So all employees of the company are listed in alphabetical order. From the first 10 numbers, you randomly select a starting point, number 6. From number 6 onwards, every 10th person on the list is selected. That's 6, 16, 26, 36 and so on, and you end up with a sample of 100 people. Suppose you are selecting every 6th person, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1, 6, then next will be the 12. So next 16, 26. In this way you are selecting every 10th person. So that's what is written here, and then you end up with the 100 people in the sample. Then, now if you use this technique, it is important to make sure that there is no hidden pattern in the list that might skew the sample. For example, if the HR data groups employees by team and the team members are listed in order of seniority, there is a risk that your interval might skip over people in the junior roles, resulting in a sample that is skewed towards senior employees. So, but there is one precaution when you are making use of this probability sampling method. So what is it? So you should see that there is no hidden pattern in just making the numbers. For example, if the HR data groups, they have the employees by team. So if they have a team and the team members are based on seniors first and then the juniors, then the risk that your interval might skip over people in the junior roles. So when most of the seniors get selected, the juniors may not get selected, as a result of which the sample is skewed towards the senior employees. So only the senior employees get selected and the junior employees don't get selected. So we have to take care to see that there is no hidden pattern in the list. The next one is the stratified sampling. Now, what is the stratified sampling? It involves dividing the population into subpopulations that may differ in number of ways. It allows you to draw more precise conclusions by ensuring that every subgroup is properly represented in the sample. So, in the stratified sampling, you divide the population into subpopulation. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, this is one group. Again, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So, this is the second group. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, this is the third group. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, this is the fourth group. So, you divide it into groups. So, dividing the population into subpopulations that may differ in important ways, it allows you to draw more precise conclusions by ensuring that every subgroup is properly represented. From this, I select one person, from this group one person, from this group one person, again from this group one person. So, in this way, I can ensure that every group has a proper representation. To use the sampling method, you divide the population into subgroups based on the relevant characteristic: age, range, income, bracket, role, job role, etc. So, on any one of these criteria, you just divide the population and then you select one from this. So, based on the overall proportions of the population, you can calculate how many people should be sampled from each subgroup. Then you use random or systematic sampling to select a sample from each subgroup. Now, from each subgroup, you just select one person at random. So, that becomes the stratified sampling. Then stratified sampling. The company has 800 female employees and 200 male employees. You want to ensure that sample reflects the gender balance of the company. So you sort the population into true strata based on the gender. Then you use random sampling on each group. Select 80 women and 20 men, which gives you a representative sample of 100 people. Now suppose there are around 1000 employees in an organization, out of which we have 800 female and 200 male population in this. Then you have to see that the entire 1000 people, they are made into two groups. That is, one is 800 consisting of female and this is the male population. Then you sort them based on the gender. Then you use the random sampling technique on this. So from them you select 80 females and here 20 males. So totally you will have 100 sample who will be representing this group of people. The next one is the cluster sample. Cluster sample also involves dividing the population into subgroups, but each subgroup should have similar characteristics to the whole sample. Instead of sampling individuals from each subgroup, you randomly select the entire subgroup. So here also you are dividing the population. The population is there. So you divide them into various subgroups and then you see that you randomly select the entire subgroup is selected. So if it is practically possible, you might include every individual from each sampled cluster. If the clusters themselves are large, you can also sample individuals from within each cluster using one of the techniques above. This is called as multi-stage sampling. So even in cluster sampling, we divide the entire population into various subgroups, but each subgroup should have a definite characteristics in the whole sample. So instead of sampling individuals from each subgroup, you randomly select the entire subgroup. So from the entire subgroup you are selecting. So if it is practically possible, you might include every individual from each cluster sampling. So sampled cluster. So if the clusters themselves are large, you can also have the sample. So you just divide them and then you just pick and choose. But if the clusters are very large, then you can select only one as the sample from each of the clusters. So this kind of a sampling, we call it as the multi-stage sampling. Now, this method is good for dealing with large and dispersed populations, but there is more risk of error in the sample and there could be substantial differences between the clusters. It is difficult to guarantee that the sample clusters are really representative of the whole population. So, this is good for large and dispersed populations. So, but there is a lot of chances of error in such kind of a cluster sampling. So, we should really take care to see that each cluster is a representative of the population. Cluster sampling, the company has offices in 10 cities across the city, all with roughly the same number of employees. You don't have the capacity to travel to every office to collect your data. So, you use random sampling to select 3 offices and these are your cluster sampling. So, example, we have seen that suppose there are 10 offices in a city and you have to select, you cannot go across the city and collect all the information from all the 10 offices. Then you just at random you select the 3 offices which are close by and they become your cluster sampling. So, with this we come to the end of this session. Hope you have all followed it. Thank you.